Hello YouTube, Shroomies, welcome to the channel. In today's video we're going to talk about mid to late game progression, and I'll give you a lot of tips and tricks on what to focus on during this period. This account is started on server 1711 and it is just into week 19 of the gameplay. Overall, from a spending wise, this account have spent just a little bit over 1,000 USD. And we're going to talk also in this video about, if you do want to spend, what is probably the most gets you the biggest bang for your buck as well. We'll go through all the different focus area listed over here in terms of mostly talking about, what are the tips and tricks you could use to be a little bit more efficient as you play through. And of course, near the end of the video, I'll go through the skill setup for all of the content that I have. Just give you a quick sense of progression on where I am. I'm going to quickly show you my stats. I am a Plume Monarch, and I still strongly recommend players to use Plume Monarch to a point where they finish pretty much as far on the PvE progression as they can. Get to a point of Eternal where all the extra Eternal gear then start coming in to help you pick another class you want to build in PvP, because I will say, when you go from here late game to end game, Plume Monarch does fall off in the PvP on the side, but on PvE definitely Plume Monarchs are the strongest, so you want to have the flexibility of switching between classes depending on the content that you are doing. And a lot of the PvE content can be skipped, so you can just push till the end and then stay mostly in your PvP class, and then rarely switch over to your PvE, for example, on Wednesdays to do all of your PvE push when cross server arena is not available. So without further ado, let's get into the account. Overall, on the progression wise, for people who are wondering on the dungeons, so I am on difficult 149 over here, 138. Our server is still progressing further along. I'm pretty sure Ancient City shouldn't be an issue. On Chrono Tower, I'm at 135. Flame Temple, I have finished. And of course, I finished on my Dark Trial a long time ago. And we'll also talk about, later the Dark Trial. How, what is the skill setup using a Plume Monarch to clear these most efficiently. Cloud Trials, I'm able to push to difficult 23. And that is kind of on the campaign progression side. Ranking wise, I am ranked top on campaign push. On soul trials, I am also top right now on soul trial ranking, which is very important in terms of getting your free souls, soul shards for your progression. Now, there are definitely stronger PvP players on my server. I'm not, by far, I am not near the top of the whales. But on PvE, this is where, your PvE progression translates to more resources for you to make your comp stronger for PvP. All right, first off the bat, when it comes to mid to late game, a lot of the things are easily capped. So the first place I'll kind of go is talking about talent, awakening, and enchants. So when it comes to talent, this is where the biggest part, and it's actually not very expensive. You just saw me click very quickly through the Dark Trials. And what you've noticed is every single day, this is the amount of feathers you will be able to get from that, not including the mounts. That will give you that. And then talent, you should be able to get close to 200 coins every single day, feather coins here for you to upgrade your talent. Just to give you a sense of where I am talent wise overall, this is my total, and it's enough to give me 2 big nodes now. Now, when we think about our talent, the first thing to remember is you can actually level up all of your talent at the same time. And when you're starting out, just getting all of your basic attack, for example, up on all of your trees at the very beginning, this is going to be really helpful. And because you can reset all of these talent for free, you should have multiple builds set up, especially as you get more and more talent points available for you to allocate. So starting off the bat, getting your basic stats to all of these. And this is super cheap, and you can do this with all of your trees. And this will help you. You can start moving on to the next one when you have the necessary points of 10, or for these ones 5, to get to your final node. Now, the moment when you finish one of these nodes, for example, quick upgrade, you can now choose another node on this page. So this is how you can build for your full trees. You can have up to 4 of these larger nodes completed in total across the board. Now, what's going to be important as Archer build is, in theory, you want to be able to get down to here where you have crit damage. So just going to do a very simple light build for Archer, so that you get a sense for what you can kind of start with, and how much talent points you need at different stages, and then you can consider resetting to build slightly differently. So I would say for Archer, your primary node you kind of want to get to is actually, I would suggest, when you're first starting out, just focus on these nodes. And this is a very cheap build. You want to get to your combo here, right? And of course, for every single one of them, get some of your attack up, and maybe for Fury to be able to go to a point where you can get some crit damage over here. You can see I'm barely at 1,000 points on sorcery. You can get to 10 on attack. Beastmaster, you get onto attack. So you can see less than about 1,000 feather coins, and you can easily obtain this probably within the first month after the talent unlocks. And this is going to give you a decent amount of boost to your combo damage, your crit damage, as well for your base stats around HP, defense, and attack. And it's relatively cheap. Usually you can do like up to these to around 16 or 17 before, for example, the cost of going from 1 level up additionally from combo damage. Now, once you get close to 5,000 point where you can unlock your very first node, what ends up happening is you're actually not going to, you shouldn't do that, because the amount of stats you can possibly gain from just evenly allocating across the board will be far more. You should be close to around 8,000 points before you start considering any major nodes, because because everything else before is much cheaper to upgrade. You're much better off, for example, getting some of these close to 20 on your base stats, and then for these key ones, get it around 15 or so, and that's a little bit more efficient in stat allocation. Let me show you a couple of different ones I have built out. So for example, here on my max DPS build here, really you can see when you get over 13,000 or so, it's starting to worth it to have both this one unlocked as well as this one, and then everything else you can still put all of your stats into attack, then again into these ones where you're focusing on crit damage, combo. You have combo over here as well, attack speed, and of course Fury, get a little bit more on crit damage over here. Now over here on sorcery, once you get even more points, it's actually worth it to consider getting some more active energy regen, and it might be worth it for all class to consider getting that. But at this point onward, really I want to take a moment to talk about, pretty much if you are a low spender, the most valuable pass in terms of late game progression is all around talent. So in your privileges here, by having your lifetime pass gets you 1 additional attempt at dark trials, and then every month get your dark trial card here. This is going to give you a 50% extra reward, which is huge in terms of leveling up your talent. You can see there's a huge jump in stats going from 60 to 71, and of course every 10 level, that 10 level has a huge jump, but of course it takes a ton of these feather coins as well. When it comes to your specific build, now the nice part about all of this is you can reset. So definitely you should set up here for different use cases. For example, in PvP, Here you can see I've opted not to go for that full node because this node, every 3 seconds it increases, right? So it takes 15 seconds to fully charge up, but in PvP, your fights often as a Plume Monarch is much shorter. So what I end up doing is, you can see I have allocated way more points into attack speed, combo damage, and then I have actually allocated flexibility. In all my PvP version build, I build up specific resistance against enemies that I'm fighting. And of course, because this one only takes 10 seconds to get fully up to improving your combo damage, this one I actually have decided to keep. While in PvP, only when fights get really much longer, this one becomes a little bit more useful compared to having all the other stats. But once my talent gets high enough, definitely it's worth it to unlock both nodes, because that allows me to go into the last node and then start adding even more resistance into here. For example, in Fury, there are definitely some that will also help here when HP falls below a certain point. So this is really good for players that are using whether a cheetah mount or using a moon crescent. When you fall low, you can all of a sudden have a boost in your attack speed and damage in the last couple seconds, outdo the enemy. Now, if you're using a build that's super tanky, Ascension, for example, will be super helpful. Again, if you are at if you're at Dark Trials 10, you will be able to get 200 coins every single day. So, and of course, this is where you want to make sure you go over here into Parking Wars. Make sure you don't forget every single week. This is where you do want to buy your Dark Trial cards. It adds up, right? Every little bit in this game adds up. Your talent is very much time gated, so the sooner you get to level 10, that's going to be more helpful. Okay, so next thing I will talk about after talent is making sure you have different type of talent for different content, right? So for example, I'll say one last thing here. Like, you can actually allocate more stats into defense. So for example, I do have a little bit more of a tanky build. I changed it yesterday. But you can, for example, have a tanky build where you prioritize getting all of your defenses up to 20 first. This is going to be helpful for content like snow, content like lava, where you do actually benefit a lot from having more defense. Okay. This video is going to be a little bit long, so thank you so much if you've gotten here so far. I will try to put timestamps so it's easier for you to navigate through this content. So in here, similarly with your class awakening, you have the ability to reset this and have different setups. So for example here, like this is more of a DPS build where I can actually focus specifically on damage output. In most people's build, I will find you want to prioritize attack over combo, and then over crit damage. But noting that, every additional level, every 10 levels, the cost goes up. So here, there's still 25. And then down here, between, for example, up to 20, from 10 to 20, it's going to be 20 each. But then above 30, it becomes 30. And then you go to 40, it's going to be 35 each. So at some point, you can't just keep stacking one. It's a little bit more efficient to kind of stagger it this way and then maybe move up. But you can use it in different situations. For example, this is a PvE build that's specifically for content like waves, where having defense or HP doesn't matter because even the trash mob will one-shot you, right? So pushing souls is the same idea. You want to use this type of a build. Now, when it comes to things like tanking, I have actually allocated and prioritized more things on defense, for example, because higher defense allow me to just take less damage and I'll be able to heal through. Like, I've chosen not to put HP, but I can definitely put more HP into here as well if I find I do need it. But defense is actually prioritized more in my mind, and having sufficient damage. So this is specifically what I use for Snowlands, for example. I'm working towards Snowland level 9, and that will require me to have close to like 300-400 mil of defense there to effectively tank the boss. In PvP, if you notice, in PvE content, in all PvE content, I've not put a lot of crit resistance because a lot of the time the bosses simply, you don't really get crit that often, and if you do get crit, right, like I think some content, like you can check if the boss actually crits you. If you don't get crit a lot, having crit resistance is not really required, and this will be really helpful for you now, and you want to max out on your damage. But when it comes to PvP, for example, this is my PvP build, you can see I've actually put a lot more points on crit resistance, because you want to use your crit resistance to effectively mitigate a lot of the crit damage, especially fighting against warriors, pals, as well as other plume monarchs. All right, so this is because you can easily reset using your talent and using your awakening is a great way of balancing your stats. The last place I'll go over to is talk about enchants, and enchants, you can find them over here. Now, enchants is a great way of adding your stats, and once you hit level 25 on the flame temple dungeon, you can really just get close to 3,000-4,000 points a day. One of the key things a lot of people forget about is when they're leveling up, you can actually use these potions, and these potions you can get them over here in I would say the best place to grab these potions is actually from your Pantheon trial. And in your treasure vault, you can pick up some rune restore potion, as well as some rune block potion each week. I will find they're probably the best place to pick it up value-wise for what other options you have there. These potions are super helpful, because really what's really nice about in this game is in many other type of games that are like this, you will farm so many of these and you roll over and over again until you get the right one. This one, when you are upgrading these pieces, for example, so as I'm upgrading, so I'm going to go into the upgrade interface. You have the ability to actually use the red potions to block it. So when I get to level 4, 8, 16, whatnot, I would actually be able to use one of these potions and reduce I can guarantee the suffix roll increases does not go into that stat. So that allows me to be a lot more efficient in terms of getting the right one. So in here, you want to make sure you're focusing on the right substat. Once you get a really good one, take the time, use the extra redstones if you have to make sure you roll really good pieces. So for example, this is a really good piece. I literally rolled all 5+ upgrades all into global combo. And when I will block the ones that I don't want. So for example here, I wouldn't want any in ignore launch, for example, because I do want in PvP use this piece as well. So even if I get some skill damage resistance or power damage resistance, I'm okay with that. But if I, for the last one, like I was, I think 4 rows into the last one, I didn't roll into the one I want. I simply used a green potion, reverted it. I do lose all the, I think close to 4,000 redstones I used to upgrade it, but that's okay, because it's much easier to spend the extra redstone, because when you're farming 25, every day you get about 3,000 to 4,000 redstones, and every week you're going to be able to get a green potion. It's better to try to make these perfect pieces than coming back much later in the game and realizing, hey, where am I going to squeeze more stats out? And it's usually over here. And these global stats will add up and help you pull ahead. And, you might feel like I'm wasting like 3,000 stones plus a green potion to not get that perfect roll. But in the end, you're going to need to come back and do this anyways too, if you want to maximize what you can get out of different aspect in the game. So here you can see I got quite a few pieces like this. Here's in the global combo where, I block the third one throughout and just go for global combo. Here again, you can see a lot of rolls into here. For all of this, I blocked out, ignore launch again, and I got some healing, which will be helpful, and some boss damage over there. So again, a lot of the pieces are focusing a lot on getting. So with this, for example, this piece, if I get a better piece, I could definitely work on this one from beginning to end and make sure I get more global combo out of it, right? So hopefully that helps you in knowing how to select your substats and roll. Because in this, once you finish, right? And you're still going to get a ton more redstones. And what you want to be using those redstone for is for your other classes that you plan to build. But because this is such a long, grindy game, like these resources are really actually meant for you to for you to use those potions and get to like the perfect rune piece once you get the drop that you need. As you can always just revert if you don't like what you saw there. So the other part I would say is you can also have different sets in here. So what's nice about different sets is I can actually use a piece, for example, that I have already equipped. But you can have some extra pieces to switch in. And this is the piece slot that for PvP, for example, you will switch in for different type of situations. So for example, here, you might want to have one that's combo resistance, have one for counter resistance to fight when you're fighting warriors, or have one that's for POW resistance. I don't think there is a skill damage resistance main stat, unfortunately. So if you want to counter against mages, what you might need to do is trying to get some skill damage resistance actually on your substats, which is much harder. On this slot, for myself, I've actually gotten two pieces set up. So I have one for crit resistance and one for crit damage. So I use crit damage in PvE, and in PvP, I use a crit resistance bonus piece. And I find this really helpful, being able to switch back between the two. In terms of sets, the most versatile I actually find probably will be getting Blazing Roar and actually use Iron Wall, because Iron Wall set, if you can get in there, global crit resistance, this is the only set bonus you can actually get out of it. So because if you haven't checked out my damage calculation video, you definitely should go check it out, because global crit resistance and global crit damage, they're actually multiplicative in nature. The formula is actually you take your critical damage divided by the enemy crit resistance, and then use that in the calculation for how much crit damage will be doing to the enemy. So both have diminishing return, but you do want to, as you progress in the game, have sufficient critical resistance in PvP. I can't emphasize how important this is to prevent yourself from getting like just completely destroyed by warriors or archers, or even the POW class. I believe that helps against POWs when it comes to crit resistance against POWs. All right, so that is a lot of detail about Talent, Awakening, Enchants. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm more than happy to go answer them. So next part is talking about souls. And souls, again, this goes up to I think level 200 or something. And as you can see, they get very, very expensive to upgrade. The highest one I have is 35 already, and you can see it takes 8,000 points to upgrade one of these. This week happened to be Soul Rush week for me, and you can see in a typical week, like if I didn't spend anything, with the highest and a whole bunch of mount that gives me, I'm only at 8,000 souls or so in a typical month. So it is very, very time consuming. This is also another important tip here is in many guides, people are going to tell you, hey, you want to be using your gems for your mount key upgrades. Well, I can tell you that it is actually, especially at this point in the game, it is very, very expensive to upgrade your mount using your gems. Here, just going from this one level, I'm not even at, I can't even imagine how much it is from 7.9 to 7.10. I used a ton of gems on this, and I'm only about maybe 4-star ahead of someone who hasn't spent a lot, and instead they have spent way more on souls. All right, at this point in the game, mid to late game, actually using all of your gems on Soul Prayer will actually give you far more bang for your buck, because here for 8,000, right? 8,000 you get 1,000 soul crystals, and here you can get maybe for, let's just say you got 1 million, 1 million gems. If you use 1 million gems on your mount, let's just see how much stat you're getting, right? You're getting, just for reference sake, right? Let's just say we use this. You're getting about a little bit over 15. Yeah, about 15,000 on every single one of that. That is equivalent, okay? That is equivalent to the same amount of boost. You're going to get one level from each of these, right? For 1 million gems. But if you go over to soul here, acquisition, right? We're just gonna do a little bit here, right? We're gonna just actually use some gems here, 8,000, right? So you get around what, 300, 800 there, 1,000 there, right? Let's just say, we're gonna be a little bit more conservative and say 500, right? So 1,000 pulls is 800k, and that's gonna give you 50,000 points here. The amount of upgrades you can get over here, that's 8 of these upgrades, and these global stat multipliers are going to boost your stats way more, okay, way more in terms of boosting your damage than just one tiny level there. So don't blindly, after you reach tier 7, don't spend any more gems in here whatsoever. Spend all of it in souls to a point where like 1,000,000, like 50,000 is not even get you a level or 2, which is not going to happen. So long story short, once you get to tier 7, don't put your gems there. The best place to use your gems is actually in souls. Okay? The other part about prayer statue is where we're going to go. And this is where I'm going to give you guys a tip about rolling. A lot of the time people are like, okay, I am going to try to roll for, really good stats. And there's actually a decent amount of spread. So you can see, something SSS here, is 91, right? And here's 99. There's still a 7% global combo. All of these differences actually eventually add up. And you have a long, long way, all right, between beginning of statue 8 to statue 9, which is the next level. I finally get SSS, and the chance of SSS plus is very, very low. These upgrades, you have a lot of opportunity to actually try to roll really good set. And what you want to do is actually get a functional set, so something like with all SS combo, and then actually start a second one and start trying to roll this. You want to have at least 2 different sets you can switch between. Archers, for example, have a general problem in PvP where if you face enemy with very high defense, you're not going to scale very well for your damage. So sometimes it's actually helpful for you to have, like, for example, 1 or 2 global attack with the rest on combo damage, and that's going to actually help you do a little bit better. Now, of course, as I'm getting ready to switch over to other classes, I do have this ready for a mage build. I have one for like all defense and one for HP that allows me to try some tanky builds in there. But in this case, always start off with a set that you can actually use, right? And then start working on the exact same one again, and then be a lot more picky with your rolls. So for example here, like you could actually go for a lot of like 97% plus rolls. It will take you a lot, but you always have something to fall back on as you work on a much more perfect build, and you have a lot of prayer points to go through, and you will have plenty before you get to SSSS plus. So that's on prayer. The next part I'll talk about is gearing, and this is where, along the way, you will definitely want to keep a lot of your Aureus pieces, and I still have some of them laying around. This is where you want to get used to having, multiple sets. So here you can see, I had a lot of my older pieces here, like they were, as I was switching them off, like all these quick combo pieces, I kept them until I gotten to what I have gotten today, like only a couple of days ago. And you can see I'm at, how far I am. I'm like, 1 bar and maybe a half into lamp 29 before I even got, 9 pieces. And a lot of my friends, who hit Eternal around the same time as me, only has like 6 or 7 pieces. So I'm really on the lucky side. I'm really happy to, finally finish with a build with all Eternals with like quick combo on every single piece with the exception of 1. Because if you do have the red banana pal, you only need 9 pieces. If you have the purple toothpick, you can even do with potentially just 8 pieces there with perfect substats, which is going to be really helpful. But essentially, you want to have 100% combo and close to 100% crit rate, the best you can. In your star array, you do have the Nature's Keeper that gives you passively more crit increase, which is really helpful. There's a couple of items in the game, like for example, the Beast Roar the Beast Roar Bow is going to give you 20 crit rate, but that's a super expensive item. Most players don't have it, but something a little bit more attainable. If you're a low spender, you can go into the shop, and there is this purple toothpick, and here you can get like 10% crit rate, which is really helpful for archers as well as for warriors, to get your stat close to that. And crit rate, a 10% jump in crit rate is like a 10%, at least a minimum 10% boost to your overall damage compared to where you are. So it is a very big jump for having a POW like that. You do give up a little bit on defenses for using up one of the slot, but nonetheless it will help you huge on the damage output piece, which is the important part, right, for a lot of the PvE progression. So that comes to gearing. You definitely want to be keeping a lot of pieces on the side, right, as you're progressing through. So for example, here in my setup, a lot of people are wondering, like, what do you want to block off? So for example, I know I am not going to play the PAL class as much as, it keeps giving it to me on the power up for the mount. I have decided to block off, I'm not going to do an evasion build. I'm not going to do PAL combo. I'm going to have pieces laying on the side, eventually deciding if I'm going to switch over to a warrior or am I going to switch over to a mage. And I got a ton of different things laying on the side. So for example, I'm collecting a double crit set because I want to try something like a shadow archer but with a mage setup, so I can pre-blitz everybody. I'm trying a regen mage build, so this is like the prophet regen setup. And when you're rolling these, what you could do, right, is actually do Aurea setup. So for example, I have my actual full mage setup, so you can see every single piece here is skill, crit, and stun. And I was rolling it from Aurea's plus, but keeping the set skill, crit. So what you can always do, right, is as you're rolling through here, I got it set up right now like this, but before I had something like I did Aurea's above, and I picked crit combo, and over here I had a skill, crit, stun, for example, just so that I get the exact piece that I want. Right now I have left it to be open because I'm going to try different type of profit builds. I think that's a good transition over onto Avains, because Avains is definitely a big one. At this point, you really want to work with your server because you're fishing for specific, legendary, really rare affixes. So this is my Avian. A lot of people on the server, like everybody is asking. All of these are active players, and they're all asking for either a rage slash or they're asking for multiple shot. One of my friends has punch counter, which is absolutely the key effects you want to have a warrior. But basically you want to share this around with everybody once somebody has it, so they can help have really good Avians. Michelle is really good for mid game. The reason why is actually because of the stun. The stun allows you to be far more, give you way more survivability on content like Theater and Blazing Cave, where the enemy is attacking slowly. It actually helps you a huge amount on PvE as well, because you can see the enemy basically is not moving whatsoever when you're using Michelle because you stun them so often. This is also really helpful to have a Michelle in Cloud Ascension as well. So you get to see a little bit of how Michelle works as we go into near the end of the video. We're talking about the different skill setups for all of the different content. But in general, those are kind of the key affixes you want to look for. The most important ones for Archer is Rage Bonus and Shroom combo, and then against the Strong for the bosses. Getting this legendary affix either on Rage Slash or multiple shot, it's not absolutely key. This is where a lot of the time people kind of you're trying to get that perfect Avian, and a lot of time it's really difficult. For me, once you get to a certain point, you get a lot of the you can actually, breeding base, where is it? Avian management. So here for my Avian, I can actually go into Avian Rebirth, and you can see I've actually rebirthed this one so many times. Once you hit 10, it goes up to 2. It was as high as 1.4 at some time. I got greedy. I was trying to go for the 1.5, and it just went downhill all the way from there. So I kind of almost ruined this one. So don't get too greedy. Once you have one, don't stop. Keep going, because eventually you want to have a couple on hand, and you want to rebirth them, and so they can breed against each other. When you breed avians, what's important to note is these affixes have a greater chance of being passed to from the parent down to the next generation. So like for example, in your breeding base, like I'm breeding all of these again. Often what I like to do is breed affixes that have identical. So this, I'm trying to actually get one to replace over, get Rage Slash onto a Michelle. But basically there's a greater chance of passing down the affixes. They are naturally occurring. So here you can check like if you're on a new server, you're like, nobody has multiple shot. Well, Michelle actually naturally comes with multiple shots. So if you keep breeding Michelles, you'll eventually get one. I was actually the first one on the server, luckily, to get multiple shot, and obviously quickly shared it with everybody else on my server. I think I was like somebody else had Rage Slash, and then I was breeding with them to get Rage Slash. But these are all the natural occurring ones that you can find. You can check it in the book. And these are the really good affixes. Now, if you're looking here, there's actually affixes that, actually not so great, that people might think they're great. For example, Media Feather actually doesn't heal that much. But like here, Purr, for example, is really good because Purr has punch counter. This is the huge one for all of the warriors that are built with a lot of counter strike. Really good in PvP. All right, so that's what I'll say about avians. Basically, don't ever stop breeding them, and share a lot. And that's the number one tip I'll have. If you want it, like the odds are really small, right? So basically you want to match from the parent, like at least 3 of the affixes that you want. Just keep breeding, and hopefully you get the 4th one matching. So like it will basically, if you have 4 on each side, it will pick from the pool of all the fixes that are available there. If you have, for example, both multiple shots on both of the parent, it will increase the chance of you getting multiple shot on the child. So what I try to do is because when I bred this, obviously I didn't have this before, and I think it was like multiple shot against a strong, and then Shroom one, the other one had multiple shots against a strong and rage bonus. Eventually I got this one when it finally gave me the right combination of, it's almost like properly following how genetics work, I guess. Next I'm going to talk about rush events. This is where the rush shop is, and on these events, even if you're not an archer, right, you don't need this. You still want it because you have all these mount passive substats that you can potentially gain, and all these give you base global attack. I already have them. I have one of every copy, so additional copies will allow me to go get more passive stats from them. I would say the priority order will be Pride Breaker. This is actually the main one you use as an archer for free to play. And then sometimes in a burst situation, you might want to use Cloud Drifter. Adaptos Line is actually really, really good for in situation where you do need to tank just a little bit. For example, in Snowlands, I actually use my Adaptos Slime more often than not. Ghost Back Behind is really good for the evasion build. It's a very good free to play option because you really don't have a lot of options for back items. But you do want to work your way through to get all of them because you want it just even for that passive global stat that's available here. Now you can see I still have 29 and I can buy more. I'm not going to at this point in time. One of the things you will notice is it is really, really hard for a free-to-play player to rank really high on these events. So there's a couple events that I think that may be a little bit more free-to-play friendly. So for example, I would say with the current setup right now, the Prayer Rush event and perhaps the the Relic Rush events are probably the more free-to-play friendly ones. The reason why is, as a free-to-play, you might not have a lot of skill rush tickets, which makes tech rush very painful. It's not that you don't have enough, ores. And of course, pay-to-win players will always have the pass. And with the new setup, it's even harder for free-to-play to accumulate a lot of rocks, and also the speed-up tickets to really dump all of your ores during that week. So I would say focus on getting a lot of your tokens from Prayer Rush and Relic Rush. And what you can do is actually save for 2 months instead of 1 month. So basically do the bare minimum, especially for Prayer Rush, right? Where even the rewards aren't that great. You basically get a lot of the Relic points instead. You can actually basically do nothing for 2 months. And because really, as I mentioned, right? Remember how Prayer Rush from prayer level 8 to 9, this is probably 3 to 4 month farming for most people, maybe even 5 if you're free to play. And you can definitely, save 2 to 3 million points and easily get first place. And you can be far more efficient in getting the event, right? If you think about the ranking system here, you can be far more efficient, going for first place, getting 10 versus like being stuck down here. And you need 5 different events to get to that 10 path. So save up for 2 months, guarantee yourself first place is going to be far more efficient as a free-to-play player if you want to get any chance of, grabbing a copy of every mount within a reasonable amount of time. All right, so that's kind of your free-to-play tip there for how you want to progress on these rush events, especially you have a server merge, and every server will merge. That's just the natural situation because the players will quit, they just keep merging these servers, and you now have way more players competing for these rush events. I used to be able to get like top 3 pretty much every event, and now you can see I'm struggling even to get to top 10 on each of these events. So if you're free to play and if you haven't even finished before the merge, you're definitely going to struggle for sure. So be prepared to save for even 2 months. And as more players do that, that strategy, you also have to adjust accordingly. So that's what I'll say about the rush event strategies. Let's now take a quick look at the spinner event. So spinner event come back on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. You need to use 500 spinners to guarantee it. And if you actually want to quickly thank Theoria Games, if you just Google spinner calendar or mushroom lucky spinner calendar, you should be able to find this link, and they have nicely listed out what you see every week. So every server go through this. The first one always will be Thunder Wrath, then White Tiger. Now if you're new to the game, you might be tempted to be like, oh, I really want to get this item and I'm going to spend money on it. As a free-to-play, you don't. And don't worry, Thunder Wrath actually comes, this is the only free-to-play artifact, by the way, and it will come back on week 18. And guess what? By week 18, you are definitely going to have enough because, you get 42 every single week, and you will be able to get one of the items. Now, if you want to go for Warrior, the mini motorcycle definitely is one of the key items for Warrior. If you're Archer, you definitely want, for example, the Blue Ox mount as well for PvP because this allows you to pretty much, start attacking the enemy as soon as, I think in 3 seconds. So hugely shorten the duration of a disarm, which is what all archers fear the most. In PvE, you can potentially use the White Tiger here for a decent amount of damage. But there's, 2 mount that everybody kind of want just for the global stats. So for example, the Koi here and also the Carpet, both of them have 10% global attack to it. So yeah, with these coins, you can use it to actually just fish for the key ones you want. And afterwards that, you really want to just be looking for global stats from these items. And of course you want, prioritize mounts because mounts can be used in parking and give you additional rewards, which is super helpful. I'll quickly mention, there's a couple of really good ones for some other classes as well. For example, like some of these back items give you alternative options. for, especially I think for the POW class, one of them is really good. For the one for POW, you have something in here for that. A good, decent option for mages as well, because these are basically where free to plays can pick up their back items as well as alternative mounts for themselves. And that's kind of your strategy. Make sure you save for the spinner events that comes up every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, and use the website to keep track of what's coming next. The last part I'll talk about is the spending event. And the spending event, this is where spenders can go into the feather shop. And in here, the crescent moon is probably one of the greatest things they've added to the shop, making players have, a reasonable counter against the cheetah mount, especially later on where players get tanky enough to actually make this work out. The cheetah mount, which I wailed for, pretty much before they made crescent mount available to players in mass, it was super cringe to deal with. And having, moon crescent gave a lot of the strong players, an option not to be beaten by a player that's much weaker than but with a cheetah mount. And cheetah mount absolutely dominates mid to late game. The cheetah mounts start falling off only when fights get to 30 40 seconds long, where it's all about outlasting the other person, and having mechanics that gradually boost your stats or reduce your enemy stats to a point where you can actually beat them. When things are really close, the cheetah mount is super clutch, which is this mount I have over here. But if you do plan a whale, people usually go get the cheetah mount, and basically this means you have death immunity. You just can't be killed, and you get one big massive hit, and usually this is the massive hit that kill enemy that don't have it. So things like the moon crescent is really helpful because it helps you actually tank that big cheetah hit and then give you 2 extra seconds, and you don't die. But if they use the cheetah mount, they're guaranteed to die after the 3 seconds is up. So you have the crescent moon mount actually combos super well with some of the talent here under sorcery. So you're going to be at 10% HP, but then you're going to increase your skill cooldown accelerated by 100%. So this allows classes like Prophet to have a double blitz, which definitely allow you to help yourself survive against cheetah players. And of course, other items that are added to the game. For example, a while ago, players have gotten the free staff for those of you who have it, and I know a lot of people on my server actually has this staff, the frost staff. So every 25% HP loss, you freeze the enemy and their pals, right? So this allows prophets, for example, tanky prophets, to really cycle through and then get to their second blitz assault, allowing you to effectively beat a lot of players by 2 cycling them on that. So now I'm going to go into a little detail about spending events, and here you can see the Aptoid plug on the side. I have all the instruction about Aptoid at the bottom, and you can find on my channel details about how Aptoid works. But you can basically save quite a bit in that spending there in game. So we'll have these spending events pretty much at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. And what's important to note that all you need to do is spend $16, and it does add up, right? But there's a couple important tips here. This is for $16, you will be able to get to the Feather Pass, and the way you do that is, you will need to spend and get the $5 one, and then all of them have some sort of pass system where you need to buy the $10 and the $1 one, and you will get the special currency that allow you to summon on it. But these are the feather passes. 6 of them will get you the crescent mount. So if you want a crescent mount, it's going to cost you basically at a minimum of $96 USD. But thinking about getting a cheetah mount will probably cost you anywhere between $800 if you're lucky, and if you're not lucky, close to $13,000 if you really have to go full pity right away, because often it is unlocked as a secondary price selection item, and this means going to full pity twice, and it gets super expensive very quickly. So highly advise, if you are a low spender, the feather path is the way to go. Now you could, if you have, if you want to whale a little bit more, you can definitely go for particular items in these events, and then you would pick up 2 feather path at a time, and then that will help you get to that mount much faster. But again, like some of the best items in the game, like for example Beast Roar Bow here, when they come back on these reruns, they're always locked behind as a secondary grand prize, which makes things super expensive, and it's for the limited few who can afford to whale in a game like this. The other part I'll say about spending event is expectations for free to plays. If you are not spending any money and all you are doing is spending the so you get all of this every day, right, when you log in, and then you advance on the regular path here, and you will get some free summons on this, and then when you're summoning through here, right, you also have the ability to buy some with gems. Unfortunately, the game is set up, even though you can find the, I think you can, no, they list the probability down here, right? But if you're not spending money, I'm pretty sure they set it up in a way where it's impossible for you to actually get one of the pay to win items on any of the events. I have never seen it happen. I checked Reddit, I checked all sorts of different places. I don't think there are any people sharing screenshots where they're completely free to play and they're able to get some of the rarer items on here without spending. But it is definitely possible for you to get some of the lower tier rewards with just the pass, and you will get it within the 200 draws. But I also have not seen people, for example, they have not gotten the Awakened Crystal or the ultimate prize there within the 200. If you've gotten, please let me know in the comments below. Like it would be super lucky if you can just get like the top reward with simply the pass, because the pass will put you at 192 draws. That's why here you need an additional $5 to get that last 8 draw, and it's like this on every single one of these events. So just so that people have the right expectation is, and this is also true for the other pay to win events in this game, is if you don't spend money and just use the gems, don't expect to get any of the pay to win items. You have to spend some money to get it, and this gets to the tricky part, because a lot of time guaranteeing pity in this game, it does get super expensive. So there is the luck factor for sure on the spending events. All right, we're 50 minutes into the video. 52 minutes. So if you're now interested in, specifically how all the different builds I have, let's go into the different builds I have for the content. The first off the bat, people are wondering what to do on campaign, and here is kind of my setup for a campaign. So what's really key is for anniversary, they've been giving us the rabbits coming, and this gives us additional 15% movement speed, and using with the snail together allows us to slow the boss or all oncoming wave down to only a 20th of their speed. So basically nothing is really moving. Now, if you're new to the game, often, what we will do is we will do a setup like this, for example, and instead I would do something closer to this. And in this setup, you're not going to be as effective for sure. You're going to be, only fractions of it. And what I like to do is I want to do a slow. So if I look at the timing delay here, there are some bosses. So recognizing, boss waves 3 through 8 are ranged and the rest are melee. And melee bosses, you can actually, I will recommend taking out, for example, Blitz Assault and put in Clone, because you have way more time to hit the enemy. But if they're ranged, doesn't matter how you do it, you're not going to have that much time. So for example, here, I would recommend you want to start off with a 0.5 seconds coming in. For a few of the bosses, they walk a little bit faster. So for example, the dragon boss, it actually comes in around the 4th second, I believe. You will probably need to put up Blitz Assault. So, and then you want to put your disarm. Disarm, usually you put 1.5 second to 2 second behind your Blitz Assault. So just be really careful, right? Like play around with this. Basically, you want to extend to the maximum you can. So for example, 6 second disarm delay with a 4.5 on Blitz Assault. And then you want to then, add in the 100 slash and the smoke bomb right around the time where you can actually start hitting the boss. So set a slight tiny delay on here. So here's kind of the general setup. I have this for the other build, but here you will use the time statue. And over here, you want to use the Spirit Necklace to increase the damage you do during Blitz Assault. Let me just quickly show you the build I do have though, because a lot of players, if you're watching this at a time where you did have the anniversary, you can see that this is far more effective when you do have the slow build, and this is super helpful for pushing this and the soul piece. So here you can see it's really important to pay attention to the amount of time you have set here. You want 0.5 on your thorn thicket, and then you want 4 on your durian bomb and 3 on your clamshell. This is the key part. Now, if you're fighting an enemy boss that do, move very slowly, to give yourself more time, what you can do is do 1, and then you can do 4.5 here, and then you do 3.5 here. Now, there's 2 different setups you want to use with this particular build. If you're fighting a ranged enemy boss, I highly recommend you use 100 slash because your clone's going to die too fast, so you're better off using 100 slash. You want to use it at a time when you can start hitting the enemy. Don't use it too early. Now, if you're fighting a melee boss, I will highly recommend removing 100 slash and use clone and put a 0.5 second on the clone. All right, so let's kind of actually just showcase how this works a little bit. And let's just make sure I have the right pals here. I'm going to put the rabbits back in there. And I should be fine beating it now, just because I did a whole bunch of upgrades today with the soul. And hopefully that's enough to help break the difference there a little bit. So you can see the boss basically is not moving whatsoever. Now, if you started the game after the anniversary, the first year 1 anniversary, you will not have the rabbit and it will not work like this. So you will obviously not be able to push as far on some of these content. But you can see I'm pretty much safe from the boss throughout the fight. And you can see, all these tiny little hits, a lot of it coming from multi-shot. And here we are very close to beating it. Let me just speed that up a little bit. I feel like we should actually be really close. Sometimes the positioning of the boss matters a little bit due to the fact that we sometimes launch it. You can see that was a launch when you knock it up into the air. And you basically want to time it so that, see, the 100 slash went off right there. So you can see I want to time that 100 slash with the smoke bomb just the moment my cheetah mount hits off it. Now, if you don't have a cheetah mount, obviously, if I actually used any mount that actually boosts damage, that's better than a cheetah mount, right? Because cheetah mount actually gives you no damage boost whatsoever. It's like the same as not having a mount until the moment you die. So let's go actually push on the, hopefully with all of that, we can do the same thing here on Soul Trials again. And this time, we will actually show a couple of things here. So for Soul Trials, definitely what you want to do here is change this one over to Chronosport, giving me an additional 8 seconds here on all of these stages. But I'm also going to actually, for this fight, I am going to actually use the Pie Breaker here. Let's see. All right, let's see if we can get another staging here. So this is another piece of content, right? Sorry, that you will benefit a lot from using this particular setup. So you can see, because it's a range boss, highly again recommend using 100 slash. And because I'm actually not using cheetah mount, this is an example of where I actually want my 100 slash. Oh, that was so close. So I would actually, for example, this is how you make your adjustments, right? So overall, right, don't need to change the 0.5433, but I know I'm going to be better off if I actually time it so that both my smoke bomb and 100 slash is going to land just when I can actually start hitting the boss. So I set it to 3 there, right there. So let's go soul trial again. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to beat it this time. And if we don't beat it, we'll use the big hit from Cheetah Mount to help survive and knock off the last tiny little bit that we need. Some people like to ask me, why don't I use one of the, it's gonna be super close again. Sometimes just need a little bit of RNG, and if not, we'll go back. At this point in the game, right, like each one of these stages, the bosses do each time we beat one, their HP increases a tremendous amount. And sometimes it's all about that, getting that one couple of extra lucky stun to get through. The other part I like to use for these bosses instead, I actually really like to use this alternative setup here on the boss, because if you have full crit rate, sometimes you will find yourself doing a little bit more damage with this particular setup, because the dragon there allows every single one of your hit to do percentage HP to the enemy's target HP. Yes, you will do a little bit more damage later, but with the Chronosport, you get 3 particular hits of that, and sometimes, it will be really helpful. Okay, so not in this case, I guess, but I know for certain parts of my progression, I found it more helpful to use this instead of this particular setup where I get damage increase to the boss. We will, just for beating it, I think I'm gonna, go back to using the cheetah mount and adjust on the timing here. And we saw that, if we do this one, I think at 1 second and this one at close to 8 seconds, we have ourselves dying with the cheetah mount and just having that boost to further increase the that big cheetah hit there. So we'll give this one last try. If we don't beat it, we don't beat it. I mean, actually yesterday, just with all the changes I've made, I pushed like a whole bunch of stages. So you can see this time, right? Like we're not doing so much, but it's because we're getting that one big cheetah hit that allow us to, push that one additional stage here. Let's see if we can push another one. I highly doubt it, because at this point, the enemy increased so much extra hit. By the way, all of these percentage target HP damages, apparently they're also capped by the amount of attack you have. So you can see, even though with all of that additional hit, I'm actually surprisingly close to beating it. But I won't bore you in this video. Of course, this is things that you will try a lot on. This particular setup, again, is also really, really helpful for your dragon stages. So a lot of time people are like, how do I beat Molten Ruin? So this is, again, a great example of the setup for Molten Ruin. Now, there's a couple of different options. So for example, at the beginning, right, you can see I'm actually not hitting the boss for like quite a few seconds at the beginning, and that wastes actually a lot of time, and it's really not good. And here you can see I think I'm gonna get hit on the second one, which is really, really bad. It actually is not good when this happens. Oh, I think, yeah, the boss is still way too tanky at this point. One of the ways to save that, for example, is when I go over here to my skill, right? I won't show it in the video, but basically adjust 0.5 onto all these skills so I get more time in that particular fight. So let me quickly then show you, what I build for like a raw pure DPS build here. So for pure DPS, for example, like a theater building here, a couple of things to pay attention to. So for example, when I'm doing the lamp boss, I want to make sure that I'm actually using the flame book, because the lamp genie isn't actually considered as a boss. And you can see here I've switched to stellar statue to get extra time on my 100 slash and my whirly snare. So let's see how well we do over here. And of course, just quickly show you the build here, right? Like pretty much every single piece I went for max damage. I put 0 stats, in defense or HP. I allocated all the stats that way. Here you can see I'm still just using the Pie Breaker. This is one of the cases, like the lamp boss is the only place where I'll say early game you want to use something like a Firefly for this, because you don't need to stun the enemy. But because so many places you do use the Firefly, don't spread your levels on your Avains. Focus on 2. Like for example, my PvP one, my Sunshine Bringer is level 70, and then only after that I started leveling up all my stuff on my Michelle there. You can see at stage 149, it is tanky. It is very, very tanky. I'm getting very close, not close enough. But that's kind of the setup I have over here. Ruin City is relatively easy. Chrono Tower, I'll give you guys the tip on Chrono Tower here. So for Chrono Tower, if you want to push, the general setup I would like to do is switch between a wave build and a boss build here. So I would change the skill set to something that looks like this. And the idea I have for beating it really revolves around... and by the way, when you're really trying to push levels, take off the auto collecting parts, because you want to pick skill boosts that are actually helpful for you in this progress. So here, even though there's no way you're going to be able to heal through earlier game, yes, HP regen is going to be helpful. You're not going to have counter, so in this case, skill damage is the most useful one. But you can see even the waves are getting on my nerves, and they're doing so much damage to me. Here, have 50% chance to do, you're not going to get that many hits. So here, actually making the enemy a little bit slower gives me more time to hit them, which is super, super helpful. Base attack, this is actually 8% on it, on your overall stun. Your stun rate 15% is actually not as useful if you have no stun already. So here, getting some base stun attack actually is more helpful. Here, I already have max combo damage, so this will be only 30% extra combo damage. Actually doing more damage to the boss would have been more helpful, I believe. I haven't done enough testing on this to know the difference between them. Here, I don't need more energy regen, so I guess I have to take that one. So this has actually been a really, really bad run. And right before the boss, I actually want to just turn things off just a little bit so that I can actually manual and be able to charge up all these things. So here I have stun again, and I want to be able to maybe extend the stun I do to the enemy because I have a Michelle too, and that's going to be really helpful. So the first thing I want to do is do this, and then I want to do all of these things up, and hopefully that's enough for me to kill the boss right there. There you go. So you want to time it a little bit, spam your Blitz Assault first, and then you want to disarm, put your clone out, and then hopefully that's enough to kill the enemy. So that's how you will push on this. Flame Temple, again, for Flame Temple and the Dark Trial. So here, Warrior, I already kind of, because I can skip through. Let's talk about these ones. So I would demonstrate my build probably on using the daily boss fight. Oh, great. The daily boss fight is off right now. So we'll probably do it's kind of like lava, but this is kind of what I want to use for the trials and daily, because the trials are so fast. Pretty much for these fights, you want to start with a Blitz Assault with, 1.5 seconds later. So 0.5 on the Blitz Assault, 2 on the disarm, 1.5 delay in between. At the same time, then drop your clone right at there, so your clone is protected. This is basically the max amount of damage you can do for a lot of situations. For mage bosses, I would recommend putting the clone just a little bit right after the mage boss on Dark Trials have done all the AoE nukes. Basically, you have that quick window there to kill the boss. If you can't kill it, you're kind of screwed when all of the damage come back. Warrior is probably the most annoying one, and I'll show you what my setup is for Warrior. For Warrior, I used this setup here, and what I've done is I delayed everything by 10. I start off with a Blitz Assault. I have actually put myself on the damage immunity book. So basically I help myself tank. And then once the enemy basically drop its shield, that's when you quickly burst out and do all the damage you possibly can to the enemy boss during that window to kill the warrior. Now, if you are Prophet, that fight is probably the easiest for you because your basic attacks can just destroy that shield. So, Prophet killing warrior. Warrior 10 was the last one I finished. So hopefully that helps you with some ideas around Dark Trials. And finally, let's see if I know today's Monday, so theater isn't up, but let's see if I have attack on here. So I can kind of show, the build here for lava, and this is why you should have multiple setups, right? Because sometimes you will have a minor difference in the power you use. You will use slightly different timing delays to optimize your damage here. Here I'm getting to a point where I can survive the entire fight. So instead of using the spore, I'm actually using the extension on this spore. So here, let's switch over to lava. Switch plan. Let's go into the fight here. Now, at some point, okay, we're going to do so much damage to the lava boss, or we're going to have defense high enough that, the enemy is actually not even hitting us. So here you can see a lot of the stun is actually allowing me to survive way better, and the lava boss is just not hitting me back. So when I have clone out, right, I have so many different sources of damage hitting the boss. The boss basically, I'm just, and you can see I chained the disarm in between that, and you did the full damage over there. And there you go, 44,000 trillion damage right there on the boss. But it doesn't really matter because we're just overkilling a little bit here. You can actually sweep every single day, or I think all you need is 1,000 trillion or so, and you can start sweeping. Or is it like 750 trillion? I forget. But the sweep button basically allows you to claim the maximum rewards for it. So that kind of wraps up, I think, all of the skill content. Oh, I do want to take a moment to talk about PvP, because I know a lot of people, like during this transitionary period, right, from mid to late game, where pretty much everybody wants to be Plume Monarch, because you want to push as far as you want on, because more lamps, right? More lamps, more lava ruin, more resources, basically, the higher level you are. So that's why everybody want to stay as a Plume Monarch. And on this is kind of, the PvP side of the things. So here's kind of some of the variations you can build. Okay, so on my PvP build, there's two parts to it, and here's a couple of flex slots. So right now, looking at some of the top players that I have to fight in arena here, I have to face Onyx here. He's a really, really strong archer, and our fights, he also have a cheetah mount, and you can see how close our fight is. And when you are matched up against archer, having the snow spirit and having the slowdown is really, really important. Okay, that fight really went my way, but usually our fights are way closer. And what's ended up happening is you basically want to slow down the archer. The archer's worst nightmare is just getting slowed. And you can see, okay, I think the reason why I'm beating him is because I got a whole bunch of soul upgrades today. Normally this does not happen like that whatsoever. It's a much closer fight than that. I'm sure because it's right after the weekly reset, I'm sure when everybody upgrade their souls, the fight is going to be much, much closer again. But if you want to, go against mages, and again, this is the key, avian you want to have. You can see debuff immunity, mine's at level 70, so I have like another -6% to the duration of control, plus the base, which gives me 15%. So this allows me to start attacking right away. So normally this arm will put 5 seconds on me. With the time statue, or close to 5 seconds, I can start attacking after like 3.8, 3.9 seconds, which is super, super helpful. Now, if they have, you know, the blue ox mount, right? That's the other one I was talking about that comes back on the spinner event, which is over, where is it? It's coming up. It's over here. There we go. Blue ox reduce the duration of control effect by another 30%, right? So this basically means, you know, your disarm is not going to work on a plume monarch. They're going to be able to start hitting you the second your disarm drops, and you can hit them really, really hard. This almost basically makes your plume monarch as annoying as you know, the PAL class. Basically, the moment the moment your Blitz Assault falls off, they're already attacking you, right? You'll be swarmed by their pals. This is the same idea. And further, you increase your damage resistance, right? Making you a bit tankier. It stacks on top of the one that's coming in from the deer pal, which makes you extra tanky. So that is kind of Archer PvP on both sides, and this is completely free to play build. So those are the two you want to go for. Now, if I want to fight against, you know, a mage, there's, you know, the option I would do is I would actually take this one out. I would use Easy Breezy, because reducing the enemy's attack is probably the best way to do damage mitigation. But because on my server there are so many archers, I actually even opt for this particular star array, because it's really a race of how much damage I do. If I'm fighting against if I'm facing a ton of mages on the server, I would actually prefer to put the genie out and just get additional defense and attack coming out to fight them. You can set up different, I would prefer to actually do different setups between my regular arena and cross-server arena, because cross-server arena, often you're fighting people who are much stronger than you, and in that particular situation, I often find myself, you know, using the genie mount, or a wider range of players. I prefer to use like the genie as the primary one for this particular piece. And then, of course, you know, I spoke about earlier, if there's certain people you're competing against on the server, definitely it is viable, especially late game, to start stacking up the particular resistance against them. So for example, if I'm, you know, competing against mages, stacking a ton of skill damage resistance actually is huge when it comes to fighting mages, and, you know, reducing the amount of damage they do to you. All right, this video has been an hour and 20 minutes long. I hope you really appreciate all of the details I went through in terms of helping you understanding and, you know, progressing with the Plume Monarch across all different aspects of the game, showing you the different builds, what's useful. You know, from a damage optimization standpoint, you know, please go check out my damage optimization video, or telling you the damage formula. But, you know, balancing between your crit damage, combo multiplier, and your you know, attack becomes, you know, absolutely key to that. But for the most part, hopefully, you know, you found everything I've said here really useful. If you like, you know, please feel free to share this video with others, and I'll catch you in the next one. Gandolf out.